Hello, everybody. I am Ru, and welcome back to my cozy little corner of BookTube, Ru with the Books. In this video, I am going to tier list all of the various books that I read in 2025 as a nice little way of putting a ribbon on top, you might say, of my reading this year. I have read quite a large volume of books, so expect a decently long video. Um, for books that I am very passionate about and I really enjoyed, I might have a lot to say. Some books that were short or a bit of a disappointment, I might not have too much to say. So the pace of this video will vary greatly. But it should be a good bit of fun, remind myself what I read, and talk about all the best parts and the worst parts of the year for me. Before I get into the tier listing, be sure to press the like button to show your support. Every little bit of engagement helps a great deal. So if you could take a short moment to do that for me, I would really, really appreciate it. And while you're down there, be sure to press the subscribe button too to get more BookTube content from myself in the coming months. I do my best to upload a little bit, at least once a week here or there. So if you'd like more content in your subscription feed in terms of books, talking about books, book cover reviews, anything along that kind of line, and like week or no, I don't do like weekly recaps, but I do recaps maybe every few weeks or so. And if you'd be interested in that, yeah, be sure to press that subscribe button. Be glad to have you as part of the community. So first up on the tier list, we have Alice by Christina Henry. I think it was a nice little book. It was fairly short. It really doesn't overstay its welcome. It's a dark retelling of Alice in Wonderland, and it's part of a trilogy. I think the first two books have Alice as the main character, and then the third book has another character, the main character. It starts off with Alice being in a psychiatric ward, and with certain events happening, she is broken out of this psychiatric ward, and she ends up having to go on a great journey with this other character to accomplish some specific goals. And what I liked about this book is how dark it really felt. Like we've got like the Cheshire Cat, who's a great trickster. We've got some really scary, ominous kind of mob type characters that Alice has to kind of navigate through and really not try not to get on the wrong side of. It had a fairly satisfying conclusion, and it leaves a bit of room for essentially another side quest at the end of the book, to do with this other character and their unresolved kind of character arc. But yeah, it was. You can read it as a standalone if you don't really care to delve into this other character's story and see where that leads. And for all of the reasons I've just mentioned, because I liked it, I'm going to place it as above average. Just a little side note here: mid is basically anything that I rated 3 stars, and it doesn't leave like a lasting impact. Above average is anything that I is either 3 or 4 stars. Um, and I really, really liked, and I can remember good like deals about the book. It's it's part of the memory. Top tier is anything I've rated 4 or 5 stars, and I really, really like. Has left like a really strong, lasting impression. I can remember the way it made me feel, what I liked about it, what I maybe didn't like about it. And then new favorites is reserved for stuff that I know is part of my like new top 10 books of all time kind of category. So yeah, there's that. Starting off with Alice, above average. Second on this list, we have The Bee Sting by Paul Murray. And this was a really, really interesting book for me because I went into it like really, really expecting to like it. It's a family saga that is supposed to be a bit of a comedy. Essentially, all of these various characters that are part of a family, they are all essentially going through like their various midlife crises or early life crises. So you've got a dad who has lost his essentially like car dealership, and he's building a bunker in the garden. You've got a daughter that is drinking rather than, focusing on her exams. You've got a mother that is pawning off old items to sell because to make ends meet because she's kind of lives a very lavish lifestyle and she needs the money. And we've got a son who is planning to run away from home. I thought that sounds like a really comical idea for a book, but I don't think it delivered quite as much as I wanted it to on the comedy end because I've read a few books this year that made me laugh a lot. What else? I found so it's a very artistic book, very literary. That was both a pro and a con in terms of the descriptions of various things. Sometimes it was really, really great, and you can tell that Paul Murray is a very talented author. However, some of the stylistic choices really let it down for me. Like, for example, there's one character in the book who has quite long chapters, and it makes up a considerable part of the POV, and her chapters are literally written without any full stops. It's just stream of consciousness from the first page of the chapter to the very end. And I really, really didn't enjoy that. It made it just an absolute slog to read. I was really struggling to um, be able to comprehend things at times just because I felt so overwhelmed. It's quite a thick book, and it took a long time for me to read it. It's one of those books where I can see what the author was doing, and for some people, they would absolutely love it. But for me, it was not ideal. The ending is a bit ambiguous, like you can choose your own ending. And I prefer when authors don't leave it to your imagination. Like, I've just read a whole book, so at least like have the decency to give me a solid ending. And I can be like, yeah, I liked it, or yeah, no, I didn't like it. I don't like when they just leave it up to you because, it's not conclusive enough for me. So for that reason, I there was a lot of things that were good about it, and I'd feel bad putting it in mid because it is generally a decent book. There was just a lot of things that I didn't like about it, which stops it from being top tier. And for that reason, I'm putting it in above average. Next up on the tier list, we have Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. It's a very interesting book in terms of it's got a kind of very streamlined story. We have a bounty hunter who goes after rogue androids, and it's his job to retire 6 androids to collect the bounty. It's almost like Kill Bill, but the action wasn't super interesting for me. I think the ideas on theology and the ideas on how difficult it was for our main character to do his job because he starts kind of almost like humanizing these androids is because he starts to kind of develop feelings for a female android, and it makes his job a hell of a lot more difficult. So yeah, the kind of theology, the world building, all that stuff is very interesting. So I am going to, but it didn't leave a massive lasting impression, so I'm going to put it in mid. So next up on the tier list, we have Before They Are Hanged by Joe Abercrombie, which is the second book in the First Law trilogy. I really, really enjoyed this book. It gave us a lot. So Joe Abercrombie writes very character first. It feels like plot is something that he adds in as he edits. Maybe I'm sure he's got his own process. But I really liked how the characters were fleshed out. They really, really started to grow on me. They had some really, really nice storylines and character arcs in this book. It kind of suffers middle book syndrome where it's not like the story doesn't progress in a massive fashion. But I did get everything that I liked in the first law book, just to a better bonus. And I think Glocta's character arc was absolutely fantastic. I really, really loved it. It was kind of like a against all odds kind of thing. I little spoiler for for later on, but I think the third book is the best in the trilogy for me. So I'm not going to put it in top tier. But I did really, really, really enjoy it. And it all goes full circle. If you know, you know. So for that reason, I'm going to put it as above average. I've rearranged things a little bit just for coherency. So I've put pushed Last Argument of Kings, a third First Law book up next. So just as I was saying, I think that the third book in the series is the best. We get the conclusions to some kind of character arcs. We get some absolutely WTF moments that had me like they just blew my mind. Um, Jezel's storyline, Glock's storyline, the way that Logan and that kind of thing that's going up in the north happened, that was all amazing. We had some incredible action scenes that were really fluid and easy to read that you can just picture in your mind's eye. Um, he doesn't, I think he doesn't work too hard on world building in the books. So if world building is a massive reason why you like fantasy, this series might not be your top kind of thing, just because it's very medieval kind of fantasy. Medieval Europe kind of fantasy that doesn't do anything too novel. But it was an absolutely fantastic experience, and I was so excited to wrap up my first Joe Abercrombie First Law kind of series thing. So I'm going to put it in top tier. First one in that category, which is exciting. It's looking kind of symmetrical at the moment, but the symmetry will break up over time, I'm sure. So yeah, there's that. So next up on the tier list, we have Bury Your Gaze by Chuck Tingle. I think this is an absolutely fantastic book. I read it as part of my spooky season reads, just to break up the more kind of serious works. Essentially, it's about a director and writer, like a screenplay writer. A TV show writer, and he writes this kind of like monster of the week kind of series where you have two detectives taking on like a monster each week, and these monsters that he's written start coming to life and interfering with him and putting him in a lot of danger. I really liked the monster of the week kind of coming to life aspect of it, because you had a good variety. You had like kind of like stalkers, you had cosmic horror. My main criticism for this book was that I would have liked to see more of it, because it ended up going into this kind of like AI algorithm kind of narrative that, while I do think was very fresh and modern, it wasn't just not what I was really going into this book for. But what he did with it was very novel, creative, interesting, and it had a very good conclusion that I enjoyed. So I'm gonna put it in like somewhere towards maybe the bottom part of top tier, because while I had some criticisms, I think it is a fantastic book, and I do want to sing Chuck Tingle's praises here, because he did a fantastic job in writing this one. So next up, we have The Butcher's Masquerade by Matt Dinneman, which is one of the later books in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series. It's the only Dungeon Crawler Carl book I read this year, I think, because I wanted to kind of put a little bit of a break just so I don't catch up and then have to wait 10 bajillion years to read another Dungeon Crawler Carl book. So I think I read this towards the start of the year, and it is easily my most favorite Dungeon Crawler Carl book, just because of what was going on. Um, the stuff with the hunters was really cool. I enjoyed seeing what Carl was doing in regards to that. I think some of the kind of game show moments were really cool. I loved seeing the progression in Carl and Donut and other friends. I loved seeing what was going on with the NPCs and stuff like that. Yeah, really solid entry. The conclusion was absolutely fantastic. It was so hectic, and it made everything that kind of led up to that moment feel so entirely worth it. Um, Honestly, it's probably the most easy to read, page turnery, fun time, funny kind of lit fantasy slash lit RPG. So actually, I wasn't even considering putting this in new favorites, but now that I reflect on it, I think it definitely deserves to be there. While I really liked Last Argument of Kings, it did feel a little bit long at times, because it just doesn't have that fun factor that Dungeon Crawler Carl has. So I'm going to put it in new favorites, because it is an absolutely fantastic book. Oh yeah. Okay, so the next book in the tier list is Catch 22 by Joseph Heller. This book is absolutely incredible. It is a very, very polarizing read just because of the way that Joseph Heller writes it. But if you like it, you're probably going to love it. And if you don't really like it, you're definitely going to hate it. He writes this book in a very kind of contradictory style where we have these humorous back and forth conversations between people that just really, really confuse you. But one of the strengths of this book is that in itself, because war is a very kind of contradictory thing that is very opposed to humanity's interests. We should be, working together rather than fighting in wars against one country against another. This book is set towards the end of World War II, I believe, and it follows Yossarian, and he's kind of like a pilot. Oh, sorry, he's a bombardier. So when there's flight missions, he is dropping bombs on places. And the premise is that he wants to get out of this job because he's done the amount of missions that he's signed up to do. But essentially, the number of missions he has to do just keeps going up and up and up. So he's kind of in this perpetual cycle of not actually being able to leave and return to safety. And there's also Catch 22, which is if you are if you don't want to fly, you are sane and therefore you must fly. And if you do want to fly, you are insane and therefore cannot fly. And that kind of contradictory loophole means that no one really gets to leave. It follows Yossarian and all of these other people in the kind of army corps that he is in, and there's some really, really interesting things about war profiteering and stuff like that. It's just an absolutely amazing book, easily new favorite. So next up, I have the two Myrtlewood Mysteries books that I read. First up is Celestial Magic. So this series is by Iris Beaglehall. It's kind of like a witchy, cozy fantasy series about a mother and daughter that end up in a magical village in England. And it is so fun and so endearing. And each book has like a little mystery that needs to be solved. So hence it's called the Myrtlewood Mysteries. Um, First up, I have Celestial Magic. I think this book was fantastic. The pacing was good. The little story, the mystery that was there was great. I enjoyed seeing Athena start attending school and learning things and start to get really passionate. It's got a bit of like a coming of age kind of thing because you have a person, coming into her powers, finding her place in her friendship group, starting to kind of develop romantic feelings for people, stuff like that. And I think it was a absolutely wonderful installment that I really, really enjoyed. So I shall put it in above average. I don't really think, uh, unless it's an absolutely insanely good book, I'll put any of these in a top tier because they're a little bit trashy in a good way, if that makes any sense. Like eating chocolate, you like chocolate, but it's not good for you. It's not good for your reading intellect, but it is fun. So yeah, above average. I did really enjoy this one. And up next is the second Myrtlewood Mysteries book that I read this year, which is Delectable Magic. I think this one was all right. It's not as good as Celestial Magic. Just for the because it felt like I don't think the mystery was quite as good. The pacing was a little bit rushed. It felt for me like Iris Beaglehall just kind of wanted to get this book out and maybe start working on the next one. So I don't think it was amazing. I think I rated this one 3 stars. It's probably the one that I enjoyed the least out of all of those books. It was still all right and it was still a good time, but it didn't live up to that kind of quality expectation that I have out of Iris Beaglehall. So for that reason, I'm going to put it in mid. Next up on the tier list, we have Cell by Stephen King. So this was a book that I had really high expectations for after I read the first chapter because it was so chaotic, snappy, like you don't know what the hell's going on. Shit is just hitting the fan. And unfortunately, it did not really live up to those expectations. Um, it really died down in terms of the pacing. I think rather than being a pure zombie story, it kind of devolved into kind of like a technological hive mind kind of thing. Stephen King had a good idea here, but for me, the execution just was not it. I think a lot of the characters are also quite samey. They were either like, you know, trying to make the best of a situation, working together, but they all had very similar personalities, or they were like bad guys, the world's gone up in flames. Let's just, live the best that we can and be little meanie people. Um, the main thing I enjoyed about this book is the way that the children were treated. I think a very common trope in horror books is that the children will notice something and they'll tell adults, and then the adults will disregard the children because the children are young, blah 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 blah. Fairy tales, blah blah blah. But the characters in this book embraced the children, and the children were quite smart, intelligent, and really helped out in certain cases. So yeah, I kind of enjoyed this book, but for a Stephen King book, I think it was a little bit of a letdown. It definitely could have been much better. I don't think its potential was fully realized. So for that reason, I'm going to put it in mid as well. I think maybe a bit better than Delectable Magic. I think maybe a bit better than no, I'd say Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. Maybe it is better. Yeah. So next up we have Child of God by Cormac McCarthy. I don't think this is one of his best works, just because it's not very plot centric. It's kind of like a slice of life of this person that's kind of like an outsider to society. He lives almost like a little gremlin in some cave eventually by halfway into the book. And he devolves into lots of kind of acts of depravity. And he's a bit of a messed up character. From a character's point of view, it was quite a cool book. What I really appreciated about this book is Cormac McCarthy's writing style. He uses a lot of very, very accurate, intricate, little used words. Like he's the kind of author that constantly has um, like a dictionary next to him as he writes. So what I really like about his writing style is he usually finds the exact right word that conveys so much in a sentence. It fits right into the pocket. So like, one word one word that he uses might really contain 10, 15 words of description within that word itself. It just fits right into the pocket that it is in. So I don't think it's his best work, but I really appreciated how much of a challenge it was to read. I had to slow down, look up a lot of words as I was reading it. And for that reason, I'm going to put it as above average, maybe lower than Before Thou Hanged, but better than Celestial Magic. In that case, also, let's put Before Thou Hanged above Beasting and Alice below Child of God. Next up, I have one of my favorite books that I've read this year. I know exactly where it's going. It's going to go in new favorites. And that is because Demon Copperhead is about Demon Copperhead, a kid it's a retelling of Charles Dickens' David Copperfield, and it is about someone that it's kind of like a chronological retelling of his life because it starts with his birth, written in horribly visceral, vivid detail. And it progresses through his early years, his teen years, all the way into young adulthood. And he is someone whose mother is very, very heavily addicted to drugs. And so she's in and out of rehab, and as she's in and out of rehab, is in and out of foster care. So we get a very, very kind of sad story about all of these horrible situations that happen to him. And he kind of makes friendships during these times and tries to make the best out of a sad situation. But as someone that is kind of in amongst these kinds of like crowds of kids that are, very unfortunate in comparison to other kids who have maybe stable families or rich parents, they fall into several traps that can be part of that kind of lifestyle. So it's a very emotional story. It's one that can really help paint a picture of what your lot in life is, whether you're dealt a good hand or a bad hand, and can like make you really empathetic to that kind of thing, to themes of drug addiction, foster care, adoption, um, like parenthood, childhood, and things like that. It's such a powerful story. And yeah, for those reasons, it is one of my new favorites. I think emotionally, it did touch me more than Catch 22. So that's up there. Next up, I have Doorway to Dilemma, which is a part of the British Library collection of like short stories kind of thing. It's not an amazing book because it's a collection of short stories written by other authors, but I was very happy to have read it because it felt like it really enriched my reading for the year, because I was reading books like so how these books work is they're kind of like a collection of short stories of a specific subgenre, and they're done in chronological order. So I started by reading like really old books written in maybe the 17 and 1800s all the way up to kind of like the late 90s. So it's kind of a collection of stories that gradually became easier and easier to read. But I had a really good time with it. It's kind of a weird one to rate because I really liked some of the stories and I really didn't like some of the stories. But I had a great time. So I'm going to put it in above average. I don't want to put it in mid because I think I gained a lot out of it, and I did quite enjoy the experience of reading these various stories by different authors. Next up, I have Eldest by Christopher Paolini, part of the Inheritance cycle. This is one I don't feel very adequate to tier list just because I listened to it as an audiobook while gaming, cooking, all those kind of different things. So my attention wasn't fully in the book. Um, I I think there was some really great stuff going on with the dwarves and Aragon coming into his own, and kind of extending that relationship between him and his dragon Saphira. Um, I think it had some great action moments, and the story progressed, and we had some some nice little things wrapped up. But I'm not fully kind of equipped to talk about it just because I wasn't fully paying attention. So I'm going to put it as above average. That's up to people whether they like Aragon and Inheritance Cycle, because it is a bit generic fantasy, and lots of people complain that it is a rip-off of Tolkien and Lord of the Rings and Dragon Rider fantasy. It is quite hard to tell by the picture, but I did like really squint my eyes and get close to the screen. The next book is Feet of Clay by Terry Pratchett. This was another fantastic entry to the City Watch subseries, and it involves Lord Vetinari the Patrician getting poisoned, and it is up to Vimes and the Watch to try and get to the bottom of who is the cause of this happening. And it is an absolutely bananas book. It was really great. I really enjoyed it. It was very on the nose and very modern considering when it was released, because um, there's kind of like a dwarf that's pushing gender boundaries, and there's kind of like explorations of Gollum rights, which is almost has like almost like an AI narrative interwoven into it in today's standards. So it's surprisingly modern for its release. It was a really good story. There was some kind of subplots that wove themselves really nicely into the overarching narrative. The story felt reasonably coherent. The characters were absolutely amazing, and they have those like caricatures that Terry Pratchett is well known for. We have some characters that we've been with since the other City Watch books, and getting more of them is such a joy. And it is a Terry Pratchett book that had me laughing every 5 to 10 minutes, which is the kind of the gold standard for a Terry Pratchett book. So for that reason, I am going to put it in top tier because I had a fantastic time reading it. Next up, we have Fever House by Keith Rosson. This was a really, really good book that I read as part of the spooky season. It's basically about this hand that when people are in its vicinity, they essentially start going crazy, getting really violent, and if people die in its vicinity, they basically come back as zombies. Is the gist of it. It's a really cool story because it's almost like a cops and robbers kind of chase, where whoever is an ownership of the hand at any given moment is being hunted by this kind of like covert to government like sub-op agency thing to because they want to get ownership of the hand again because they were the original owners and then it was lost. So we see things kind of escalate and very rapidly spiral out of control. And yeah, for that, I really, really enjoyed it. It's kind of like what I was hoping Cell to be. It's funny at times, it's intense at times. I think the main criticism I had was that there was one part of the ending that I think the author thought would be really cool, but it just kind of underperformed for me a little bit. It didn't work quite as well as he thought it would have, for me at least. It's quite a page turner with short chapters. Sorry, and for that reading, I really enjoyed it. It was exactly what I needed after some somewhat chunky Stephen King books. So yeah, for that reason, I'm going to put it in above average. Um, I think I wasn't while it was quite a page turner and enjoyed it, I wasn't super compelled to read it at the time. So I think I'm going to put it above Beasting but below Before They Are Hanged. I recommend this book though, and there's a second book that it's a duology. It's kind of like a before and after the apocalypse kind of thing going on. And so for that reason, I'm very excited to read the second book because I've been craving reading some sort of post-apocalyptic horror. Next up, I have The Final Gambit by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, an absolute TikTok sensation. It's kind of like a young adult series about this girl who um, finds herself as a piece in a very large puzzle as she becomes the inheritor of the biggest estate and I guess like financial thing in the world. And this was a really cool book because we start to see her plans of what she's going to do with the money and influencing different things. Um, but I think that having read it this year, after being into reading a lot more, it's not quite as good as I originally thought. It was what I needed when I got into reading because The Inheritance Games, the first book, was one of the first books I read. Um, and having read so much more variety, while I appreciate its page turneriness and that kind of thing, it just doesn't fit my vibe 100% anymore. Um, don't get me wrong. If you like this series, you're very likely to continue liking it. I just think because I didn't binge books 1, 2 to 3, it kind of lost its magic a little bit for me. So for that reason, I'm going to put it in mid. I feel so wrong. I think if I'm doing that, I need to put Eldest in mid too. Next up, I have The Fragile Threads of Power by V.E. Schwab. So, this is an interesting one because I think that the original trilogy, Dark Shades of Magic, could have just wrapped up where it did, and that would have been fine. You know, the big evil's been defeated and stuff like that. So now we have a new story. I think this is going to be the start of another trilogy or duology, who knows. Um, but I enjoyed it. Yeah, at the bottom line, it was a reasonably good experience. It's a fairly chunky one. I actually have a signed copy, so thank you, Vishwan. Yeah, it was quite nice. We definitely get a kind of progression from the previous books, where I guess it's a reverse progression because the main character starts at rock bottom, and we see him trying to kind of face whatever issues he's facing against all odds, and you get more of that Lila Kel um, power duo thing. If you hate Lila, then you probably would not like this book. It was like a fancy series book. Sorry. I still enjoyed the Londons. It was nice to get back to the characters that I've grown to like. I got more of the ones that I liked. I got more of the ones that I didn't like. I'm gonna put it in above average. It's kind of hard to talk about this one because I don't want to spoil stuff in the prequel series, which is not even really a prequel. It's like the starting point. Um, I'll put it maybe above Beasting. How about, yeah? I think that sounds about right to me. Next up, I have Gaping Wound by Nero Mason. So this is a short story about kind of like body horror. It's about a person who is kind of um, covertly transitioning, trying to avoid being seen by their parents, their mother. And it's kind of like a body horror about them literally chopping parts of themselves off, and it is quite gross. I think it's not an amazing story. It is just one of those like gross you out kind of horrors. If you relate to the character, it probably has more emotional impact on you. But it's something I've literally not thought about since I read it, so I'm gonna put it in mid. Next up, I have The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. This is a story about a guy who is basically trying to get rich, and like have lots of fancy, kind of lavish parties with lots of people come in, like famous people, basically trying to clout chase to get the woman he wants. I think it was an okay book. It's a classic, and it's not my favorite classic. It's a fairly decent period piece. So if you're into that kind of time period and you enjoy reading in that kind of setting, you probably would quite like it. Maybe it's one of those things where I'd probably enjoy the film over the book because it would add to that dramatization of it. But I didn't care about it that much, so I'm going to put it in mid. Next up on the tier list is Going Zero by Anthony McCartan. I thought this was a really, really cool book. I picked it up from the library as part of my support the library scheme. Um, and I thought it was a really good book. It's essentially about someone trying to make Big Brother a reality by creating all these surveillance tools. And they want to beta test this new thing they're running. And so they enlist the help of 10 people who are very smart and intelligent to essentially try go undercover and not get caught. It's kind of like those TV shows where they're like, hey, if you manage to not be found in a time span of 10 days, we'll give you £10,000 or $10,000. It's kind of like that. It was quite fast paced, very intense. We had some good kind of like action sequences towards the end. It was a pretty fun story. It was like a very, very page turnery. There was some really, really good plot twists towards the middle point of the book. And I'm quite glad that I read it because I think it was what I needed at the time, just something that I could just like flick through the pages. I am going to put it in the kind of top half of above average. I think it's probably better than Child of God, maybe not quite as good as Fever House. And I don't think it's top tier, but I think like just because in terms of like emotional impact and stuff like that, it's written as a fun action book rather than a kind of a reflection of society or anything like that. I don't think it's got like a meta narrative that it's really trying to tell. So yeah, good book. Next up, I have Graveyard Shift by ML Rio. This book is essentially about like a load of like college students or that kind of thing that meet in their local cemetery to dig, to like smoke and have a little social time after their like library like time or whatever. And it's quite a short book at only 128 pages. I mainly think that its problem is that it's got a little mystery, but it's just really not fully realized. I feel like this is kind of a draft of a book, and that draft is okay. But I really needed an editor to be like, you need to do this or that, or just the author, to Emil Rio herself, to be like, this needs like another 50, 60 pages to actually be anything of worth. The mystery was okay. The twists were all right, but I've literally not thought about this book since. And it was a little bit of a disappointment. I'm going to put it as I didn't like it. First one in that category. Next up, I have a string of books, the Gwendy's Button Box series by Stephen King and Richard Chismar. I picked up the first book in the library, and then I had to read the following books because I got quite invested. It starts off as essentially this masked or like dark stranger visits this child, Gwendy, and he gives her a button box. Now, this button box is a very, very powerful artifact that, in the wrong hands, can be absolutely catastrophic. And the series has tie ins to the Dark Tower because I've not read the Dark Tower, but from what I understand, this relic, this artifact, can actually destroy the Dark Tower. And so, towards the end of this trilogy, there are some very, very kind of covert evil forces trying to get their hands on this. In the first book, essentially, there's a button box with multiple buttons. The main button that the girl uses is one that just gives her a chocolate that you can only eat one a day of, or there's consequences. But it really kind of like energizes you, gets you thinking. Like she ends up doing really well in school and things like that. And it's kind of like she starts to think, am I dependent on these chocolates and things like that? And there's kind of like some plot twists and some kind of high stakes things that happen in this book. It was really, really, really fun, and it's they're all quite short reads. Don't know exactly how many pages, but I like to say maybe like 200, 250, something like that, maybe even shorter. I think the first book was above average. I think maybe below Fragile Threads of Power. The second book has the main character becoming a politician and trying to kind of make some changes. And it was really, really nice. I think that can be part of. I don't remember quite as much about it as I did Wendy's Button Box. I'll put it one below. And I'm not going to spoil anything about the final book, but it's an amazing conclusion with some absolutely mental things that happen. A very emotional climax that I still remember, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, Gwendy!" The great thing about this series as well is that it follows this person over the course of an entire lifetime. So it's kind of like a coming of age story at the start in the first book, and it's this person being quite old, making some very important decisions in the finale. So I will put the finale in top tier because I think it was an amazing conclusion to the series, and I think each book does a really, really good job in doing what it does. So yeah, that is the Gwendy's Button Box series by Stephen King and Richard Chismar. And it's quite an underrated series by Stephen King as well. I don't think that many people have read it or heard of it. So if you've learned something new today, press the like button. The next book in my tier list, I'm going to just get it over and done with. I have Good Witch Gone Bad. It is a dark fantasy romantasy book about a witch becoming not very innocent anymore. It's a little bit smutty and spicy. Um, I picked it up from the Stuff Your Kindle Day where you get a load of free books. I did not realize what I was getting myself into. But by the time I was halfway into the book, I was like, well, I might as well finish it, right? So I'm just going to put it in mid and leave it there. Goodbye. So next up, for the purposes of I read all of these books in a very short time period, so they all kind of blend into each other. Instead of having it as a load of separate books, I've just got the whole Harry Potter series. The cover is just the Philosopher's Stone, but it is all of the books that I'm going to be talking about. I really enjoyed the series. It's great from start to finish. I don't think any one of the books was bad, although maybe at some parts the pacing wasn't great and the events that happened were a little bit frustrating. But I think that is for a reason. Harry himself was frustrated by whatever was happening in, I don't want to say Order of the Phoenix, I want to say the one before Half Blood Prince. The one where they're all in the house. If you know, you know. In London, hiding from the Dementors and stuff like that. Yeah, it's such a magical series. It's so easy to read. Like, you actually, once you start reading it, you can't put it down at times. Um, Obviously, we love Harry, we love Ron, we love Hermione. There's such a great cast. A lot of the kind of supporting cast are so wonderful too. I'm just gonna put it in top tier. I think most people already know about Harry Potter, and most people that have read it love it. Of course, I don't condone J.K. Rowling nor her views. This is where this video gets a little bit disjointed because I should have put the other two books together. That is The Final Gambit and The Brothers Hawthorne by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. So I think I messed these books up. The Final Gambit is the final book of the original trilogy, in which Avery has to kind of solve the final trials to be able to, do what to achieve what the original goal was. And then the brothers Hawthorne, that's kind of like a side story which delves into kind of unresolved issues that all of the brothers have. Because they've all got like their various histories, and some terrible things happened, and we get kind of like a side story that delves into all of these brothers and their kind of complicated relationships and complicated backstories, and a little kind of mystery element is added into that. It was quite good. Once again, I think I'm going to put it in mid because it is not the exact thing that I'm super into anymore. But once again, if you like this series, then you'll probably enjoy it. And if you love the brothers, then you will probably love this book because this book places even more emphasis on them and their backstory. Next up, I have Hell House by Richard Matheson, which is a absolute pillar of the kind of haunted house horror story category genre thing. I don't think it's quite as famous as The Haunting of Hill House, or I guess you wouldn't really count The Exorcist as a haunted house story as opposed to a demonic exorcism possession kind of story. I think it was quite a good book. I got it from the library. It sounded quite spooky, and I was in the mood for it. I think some of the scares were quite good. It's not all just poltergeist doing poltergeist things. While it all does play into it, there are some other elements which make it exciting and relate to things that I personally find scary better than poltergeist, because poltergeists aren't real, I think. Um, there was some kind of weird stuff going on in terms of the history of the house that I think will make people put this book down. But it's something that I was able to get through, and I think it was quite a good haunted house story. I did enjoy it. It's not an amazing book by any means, but I think Richard Matheson did the subgenre of haunted houses quite well. And it concluded in all right fashion. All of the characters went through some stuff in this book. No one really left unscathed. So for that reason, I'm going to put it in as above average, maybe below the Gwendy books, but above Alice and Celestial Magic and Doorway to Dilemma. Next up, I have Honeycomb by Joanne M. Harris. This is a very special book because I've not read anything like it before, and I think what it did do, it did very well. It's essentially a kind of collection of short stories with a kind of very fairy tale vibe. All of the characters are animals, so they're like bees and like cockroaches and various birds and like rabbits and that kind of thing. And they all come together by the end to have a very coherent narrative. But because all of these stories are written as short stories, it's so very, very palatable and it's really, really easy to follow along. The chapters are all like a few pages long, so they'll range from like maybe a minute or two to at the longest, maybe 6 or 7 minutes. And this book came with illustrations that were absolutely gorgeous. I did read it as a hardback, and I don't read many hardbacks, so there's that. I think it's a really, really fantastic book. It's quite dark for fairy tales, but then fairy tales are quite dark anyway. At least so the overarching narrative is quite dark. There's twists and turns, betrayal, brotherhood, camaraderie, a lot of weird situations. And I'd say that the story is almost kind of Kingdom Hearts esque in some regards. It's a really, really cool book and it's quite underground. Like, not that many people have heard of it. I will actually put it as high up as top tier. Not as good as not as good as Harry Potter. Let me just rejig this. So I think Gwendy is maybe less good than Harry Potter. Feet of Clay is probably less good than Harry Potter. Um, Burial Gaze maybe not as good. Last Argument of Kings I'd put higher. Um, I think Feet of Clay maybe towards the bottom. Honeycomb above. Gwendy, yeah, that looks right to me. So yeah, fantastic book. I recommend it. Look into it if you're into fairy tales or reading a dark story with a kind of fairy tale vibe. Next up, I have the Hunger Games books, and this was one of the kind of goals I had for 2025 was to read the series, and I have accomplished. So I think they are really, really good. They are action packed. They are unpredictable at times because you never know what's going to happen during the games. And for that reason, I really enjoyed them. So I'd say the first book is above average. I don't know if I'd put it in top tier, because I don't know. It's a fun little story, but it's not something that really leaves me like a mega lasting impression. Other than the fact that I like the characters. Um, I wasn't hugely invested in the kind of romance subplots within this. Um, that kind of thing. I think Catching Fire was a great follow up that doubled down on the stakes. I'd go as far as to say that I think it's one of those series that just gets better and better. So I think Hunger Games and Catching Fire are above average, and then Mockingjay, I'd go as far as to say it's top tier, maybe better than Honeycomb because it was such a great conclusion, which had kind of kicked off with a good plot twist, and I think it was a bit less samey than the other books because it's more about a journey rather than a game. We have Katniss kind of leading this rebellion against the capital, and no, it's just really, really, really good, really action packed. Some great emotional moments and an absolute WTF type ending that had me speechless for just a few minutes. So next up, I have My Man Jeeves by P.G. Wodehouse, which is a book in which P.G. Wodehouse essentially kind of enforces the idea that he had with the Jeeves books. So it's a collection of short stories. I'd say it's quite similar to something like Poirot or Arthur. Sorry. Oh my gosh, it's literally escaping. Sherlock Holmes. There you go. I was thinking of Doyle, that guy. In which you have like a few short stories where there's some kind of mystery or problem, and then the main character gets his man Jeeves to come up with a solution, and they are usually quite silly or funny, and they all tie together quite well. It is quite disjointed because it's the kind of the first idea of this. There is some stories that aren't Jeeves, that actually another guy. I forgot his name. But yeah, it's quite a fun collection of short stories. It's not amazing. I think I was expecting to maybe laugh a little bit more. I'm going to put it in mid. I'd be interested in reading maybe a full length Jeeves novel as opposed to a collection of short stories because I might enjoy it more. But you never know. We'll see if we get there. So, next up we have Catabasis by R.F. Kuang. This is a dark academia story in which two students kind of traverse the go to hell and traverse the seven circles to try and find their professor and bring him back to the land of the living after an accident causes him to die and go to hell. It's kind of an interesting story. I think R.F. Kuang did a all right job with the world building and making the Seven Circles of Hell seem like an interesting place. Kind of working on the ideas from Dante's Inferno, which is part of the Divine Comedy. I think the main issues I had with this book was that R.F. Kuang was very, very heavy handed with the ideas of sexism. It is an important topic still to this day, so I don't think it's a topic that should be avoided in books. I think books are a great way to explore everything. But yeah, she was very heavy-handed with it at times. I think the more subtle things are more realistic, and I think they were very good and made me empathetic to the situations of women and things like that. Um, I also think that considering they were kind of like a power duo, or supposed to be a power duo, we really did not get enough focus on the guy in the story. I do forget names of characters sometimes, so forgive me for that. I'd say, honestly, it hurts to say, but I think this book is kind of mid just because the weaknesses for me don't necessarily outweigh the strengths. But it did have a fairly nice conclusion. Let me also reorder this. I think Jeeves is better than Good Witch Gone Bad, and Catabasis is better than that too. I think Gaping Wound can go to the bottom there. Um, I think Jeeves and Catabasis maybe had more of an impact, had me more like considering things than Great Gatsby. And then yeah, let me put those above L. Actually, no, yeah, I think that's a good order for me. Next up on the tier list, I have Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. I think this book is an absolutely fantastic book, and it definitely puts me on the edge of potentially reading more Ishiguro. It's essentially about this girl who, well, it's about Clara. Clara is the main character, and Clara is an artificial friend. So they're kind of like robots that their purpose is to be like a best friend or companion for children. And I think this book is very, very clever, despite its subtlety, because it kind of explores the relationships that children have to technology. And I think what was very interesting is that children are usually the first ones to start kind of picking up these new technologies and things like that, more so than most adults, I'd say. It had a kind of quite a nice story about this child having some kind of debilitating illness, and it wraps up really, really nicely. I think the pacing is a little bit slow, especially with Ishiguro's writing style, where it's so subtle. It can be a bit monotone and a bit slow. But it was very, very nice to see Clara making all of these observations about the outside world and humanity from the shop window before she was bought. Um, yeah, I think it was a fantastic book. It really, considering its length and considering the writing style and how maybe dry and slice of life it is, actually is very compelling and leaves you a lot to ponder about. So I will put it as high up as top tier, maybe above Feet of Clay, and maybe above Honeycomb too. Let's go there. I think I'm happy with that. And now we have Lord of the Flies by William Golding. This is set maybe towards the end of World War II or something like that. And as these children are being evacuated, they crash land on a remote island. and they have to kind of try and make like a little society, figure out who's doing what jobs, and trying to survive. Essentially, they're just eating, like foraging, and eventually they start like hunting and stuff like that. It's a very, very interesting book that explores children essentially trying to act like adults, and we witness like law and order kind of disintegrate and fall into tribalism, and things like evil are explored. And it's very, very shocking at times, considering the main characters are all children. And I think that William Golding does an absolutely phenomenal job of actually writing the children in this book. It's definitely one of the classics that I've read this year that I have enjoyed more, because I wouldn't say it's like page turnery, but it is quite compelling. There's a lot to think about and digest. And I think what he wrote is actually very, very clever. So I'm going to put it in. Oh, do I go above average or top tier? I think I didn't enjoy it quite as much as a top tier book, but it's definitely very high up in above average. So I'd maybe put it above Going Zero, but below Fever House. That sounds right. Next up, we have Of Monsters and Mainframes by Barbara Truelove. This is an absolutely fantastic debut novel by this author, and it's essentially about this ship called Demeter, and she shuttles humans between Earth and like some planet in Alpha Centauri. Um, but on one of her maiden voyages, or at least the first one that we see in the book, Dracula attacks and kills all of its humans. And so Demeter is started to be called like a ghost ship, that kind of thing. It's a book that, strangely, I was so attached to Demeter as the ship. Like, I never thought I'd enjoy an AI character so much. She's a character that kind of resonates so much humanity despite her kind of, roboticness, that kind of thing. We've got like a few journeys between the two planets, and something goes wrong in most of them. There's some good twists and turns in the book. The human characters that are relevant are quite fun, and there's actually some emotional moments that I really wasn't expecting. It was quite gripping. I just mainly thought that one of the characters, that the character that was the coolest, the most interesting, just at a base level of, okay, this is what the character is, was heavily, heavily underutilized, which I think was a massive shame. But from what we got, it was a really, really good story. I also felt that because of the rules that Barbara Truelove wrote into the villain, and some of its characters, the climax was a little bit underwhelming for me too. So I really enjoyed it as a little spooky season read. It was nice to break up the Stephen King, just like Bury Your Gaze was, and kind of break up the more serious books. But it did leave me wanting a little bit more. So I am going to put it in above average, maybe above Beasting, but below the other stuff. Next up, we have Making Money by Terry Pratchett, another Discworld entry. This one was really, really good. I really enjoyed it. It's about Moist Swan Lipwig, and after the events of going postal, he is given a job by Lord Vetinari to make sure that the bank can start running properly again, because there's been corruption and things like that. So he's given the job to kind of reinstate the bank, and it evaluates things like the value of gold and how it compares to like paper money and things like that. It's ridiculously funny. I was laughing so much. I love Moist Swan Lipwig as a character. He's so funny. He's so like resilient and comes up with these ingenious plans. There were so many little jokes and situations that were scattered into the book that were making me laugh a lot, and they were just so quirky and weird and ridiculous. And this book does everything that Terry Pratchett does best. and for that reason, I'm going to put it in top tier. I think I will put it above There Your Gaze, but below Harry Potter. Next up, I have The Faithful and the Fallen series by John Gwynne. I definitely could have Harry Pottered this and squeezed it all into one, but I actually do think it's a series that does get better as it goes on, with the first book being definitely the worst in the series. It follows Corbin, and eventually he kind of makes all of these friends, and it's essentially a battle between good and evil, angels and demons, or as they're called, the Ben Elim and the Kadoshim in this series. It's a medieval fantasy, sorry, medieval sword and shield fantasy. It's quite low magic. So if you like magic, you probably won't be a big fan of this. But if you like sword and shield combat, and a lot of action, then you probably will. This is definitely the most action-packed series I have ever read, and probably will ever read. I don't know how you could fit more action into a series in this one. It's a series that has a lot of POVs, so you can really get lost between the characters if you take too much of a break between the books, or you might need to refresh yourself before picking up another one. Um, yeah, I think okay. So I'm going to start by ranking them. I think Malice was not a great book. The pacing was pretty awful. It takes about half of the book for anything to happen. The kind of rivalry between Corbin and this other character, Rafe, was really infuriating and felt like unrealistic. Like, Rafe just was unbelievably evil for just a regular character kind of evil. Really deplorable. I think Valor started to pick up with the series. I think it was mid. I'd maybe put it above, below it. Yeah. I'd put it below Eldest. I'd put Ruin above Eldest, and I'd say that Wrath, the conclusion, was above average, maybe above Child of Gods, but below Going Zero. I think the conclusion of the series was actually done really well. I just was hoping for the kind of angels and demons thing to happen way earlier. It is definitely a very epic series. I think it's almost 2,000 pages, or maybe above 2,000 pages in total when you consider the four books. Um, yeah, I think for me, it's just constantly going between all of the POVs and just how much action there is in comparison to other stuff. I think maybe more emphasis could have been put on world building, although some of the villains were actually written quite well, considering the puppet leader and of the king. I think it was all right. I think it's an all right series. I think I don't love it as much as a lot of other fantasy fans. Next up, we have Misery by Stephen King. So I have thought about this, and I'm going to put this in new favorites because it is my new favorite Stephen King book. It follows this writer who has essentially been kidnapped by this ex nurse, and he's basically told, I don't like the ending of your previous book, or like the Misery Chastain series, so you're going to write a new book just for me. And it's such a terrifying story because it's so claustrophobic, and there are so little characters in this book. It is literally just, I think it's Paul Sheldon and Annie. It's just these two characters talking, and Paul Sheldon being in constant fear of his life because his captor is so unhinged. It's really scary because he basically can't walk. He's bedridden, and he is at the beck and call and the whims of his captor. And she does some very messed up and scary things throughout the book, and our main character goes through so much in this series. I just think because humans are the most unpredictable things, the most unpredictable characters, entities, whatever you may call it in books, this book is so much scarier than any haunted house story will ever be. Um, and so, yeah, for that reason, it's in new favorites. It's an absolutely fantastic story and my new favorite Stephen King. Next up, I have the Mr. Bourne Era 1 trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. This is a series that I picked up because it was one of my reading goals for 2025 to read my first Brandon Sanderson series. And I think it was a bit all over the place for me. Some aspects of it were great, but it was a little bit hit or miss overall. So I think the first book I am going to put in above average, because it was a great entry. I'll put it above Lord of the Flies. Actually, I'll put it even above Fever House. Um, I think it was a great entry point, and I think you can almost read this as a standalone because the story is quite self-contained. The only reasons you'd want to continue reading onto the second and third books is to find out what happens to the characters, to answer some questions that were kind of hinted at in the first book, and to build up the world because the kind of the world building and the mystery elements are very kind of hand in hand in this series. Kel is an absolutely fantastic character. He is so easy to love. He's a bit of a badass. He has a mission. His mission is bigger than self. He's doing what is seemingly impossible. And we have our little Mr. Bourne, Vin, who really, really has a lot of character development in the course of this story because she kind of breaks down these walls that were built up by her parents and her brother. She's essentially being taught how to live, how to survive in such a cutthroat world. But yeah, she after meeting Kel, she learns that she has the power to be bigger than that, that she can get away with a lot more, that she is powerful and she is gifted and talented and all of those things. The conclusion was pretty good. I think there was a lot of kind of it was quite smart because there was red herrings and things like that littered in to the course of the story to keep you on your toes. Leading on to the Well of Ascension, I think the Well of Ascension was unfortunately mid. I'll put it maybe above Ruin. Why I think it was mid was because for me, there was way too much politics and not enough action, magic, and things like that. I like a little bit of politics in my books, but I think when it kind of acts as a roadblock to the story continuing and the plot progressing, it starts to kind of detract from my enjoyment in the book. There was just simply way too much of it. I think there was some very smart things that Brandon Sanderson did in this book. Like I enjoyed the kind of the way that he was handling the mist wraiths. I forgot what they were called. When they become like when they start acting as humans and stuff like that. I think that was really cool, and the way that was handled in the third book was absolutely fantastic too. And the blue blob guys were really really cool too. I enjoyed reading about those and getting kind of like little hints. I think 'cause what's really smart about it is I've not read about anything like this in books. So Brandon Sanderson came up with a new idea in fantasy, so that's pretty smart. And yeah, the third book, Hero of Ages, I think was a wonderful book. It was absolutely fantastic. What ruined it for me was the ending. I was not a huge fan of it. So when an ending to such a long fantasy series is not for you, it does kind of detract from a lot of what was going on. But I think a lot of what Brandon Sanderson did to kind of answer all of these questions and the fact that so much was hinted at in the first two books is really, really great. So I'm going to put it as above average because I did enjoy it, but the ending did flop a little bit for me. So I will put it above Wrath. And that seems fair to me because it's not as good as the original Mistborn, but it's also better than Monsters and Mainframes, Beasting, Wrath, Fragile Threads of Power. The next one is a little bit of a mouthful, and that is the Orange Mocha Chip Frappuccino Years by Ross O'Carroll Kelly, and I really hope I said that right. So this is a story set in Ireland, and it follows a particular stretch of the main character's life, where he's going through a lot of change. He's moving out of his family's house. He is starting a career in real estate, and it just follows his life in that kind of time period. It's really really funny. There's a kind of a satire on women to women relationships and how cutthroat women can be to one another. Um, it almost feels like a comedy version of American Psycho in some regards. And it's a good time. I really enjoyed this book. There was a lot of like Irish lingo that I wasn't 100% on, but it was cool to learn and engross myself in that kind of literature because I haven't. It's got that real Irish humor to it that I really enjoyed. There's some absolutely absurd things that happen. The main character is an absolute douchebag, but sometimes it's really, really fun to follow an absolute douchebag of a main character. So I really appreciate that because I've not really read a book in which that was the case. So I'm going to put it in above average. It was a fun time, and I'm going to put it below below Hero of Ages, but above Wrath. Just because I think this book gave me kind of what I was hoping from My Man Jeeves in terms of how much I was laughing throughout the course of the read. Next up, I have Control Alt Chaos by Joe Tidy. And this feels a bit weird to rank, so I'm just going to put it in above average because it's a non-fiction book. It's about how teenage hacking has been a bit of an epidemic, and it looks at the causes of this, the kind of history of it. And it was really, really interesting. As someone that uses technology a lot, I learned a lot about the kind of ways that they were accomplishing their hacks in regards to social engineering techniques, brute forcing things, and just being a bit slimy. So I am going to I'm not going to really rank it whereabouts I think in above average it is, but I do think it is above average. The next entry I have on my tier list is Richard Osman's Thursday Murder Club. This book follows a group of old people that live in a retirement village, and all of a sudden a murder happens on their doorstep. So they already kind of meet together and try and solve unsolved cases just for fun. But then they're plopped right into the middle of a live case, and it's fun to kind of see them try and solve this because obviously they are not actually working as police people. So they try to kind of do a little social engineering and things like that to get what they want when they really shouldn't be getting all this evidence and things like that. It's quite a good little mystery. It keeps you on your toes because there is some plot twists and further things that happen. Richard Osman does a good job of subverting your expectations. I just think that when I picked this book up, I thought I was going to be in the mood for it, but maybe I wasn't. And it did take me a little bit longer to read it than I thought it would, especially because the chapters are so short. It's meant to be quite page turnery, like each chapter is maybe only 2 to 3 minutes long. But considering that, I was not compelled to keep turning those pages and keep reading those chapters. So yeah, it took longer than I thought it would. It's a good book, maybe not for me though. I'm not a massive crime fan, so I'm going to put it in mid. I'm going to put it above Great Gatsby, but below Catabasis. No, I think it's better than Catabasis. I'll put it there. Next up, I have Pet Cemetery by Stephen King, which is an absolutely incredible story. It follows a dad and a mother who move to a new town which is essentially their house is right next to a very, very busy road. And kind of along a path, a short way away from this house, there is a pet cemetery where loads of pets are buried, and then further up there is an ancient like native Indian burial ground which has a lot of power um, hidden underneath the dirt. And so yeah, it plays with supernatural elements while being a well, this feels weird to say a family story, just in the sense that it is a story with heavily about a family and parenthood and the emotions you might feel as a parent, the worries and anxieties you might feel as a parent. What I really, really appreciated in this story was the pacing. There was some very shocking events that happened at a good, like, kind of increment, a good pacing to keep you on your toes and keep you engaged. Aside from these kinds of shocking moments, there was also an absolutely fantastic relationship between our main character and his neighbor Judd. I think that's his name, Judd. I'm really, really bad with names. And it felt like a little bit relaxing just when they'd meet together and have a beer. I felt like I was having a beer with them, just kind of enjoying their mundane conversations. Um, Yeah, it's a really, really good book. I read it as part of spooky season, and it was the first book I read as part of spooky season, and I really enjoyed it. I don't think I enjoyed it quite as much as Misery because Misery feels a lot more terrifying, a lot more high stakes. It keeps you at the edge of your seat a lot more, but I do think it is top tier. I will actually put it higher than Last Argument of Kings. So very top of top tier. If I can actually move it maybe this way, there you go. That does it. So yeah, fantastic Stephen King book. Really, really got me to appreciate his writing style and the way that he does characters. Next up, I have The Last Fire Hunter by Selene Goldenberg, which is a debut fantasy book, which is getting a follow-up soon, I believe in January or February. It is set in a Thai-inspired world, rich with vivid descriptions of clothing, food, environment, and it's got a very, very cool magic system. It's kind of like almost like Buddhism inspired, where these like fire hunters, they can use various concoctions to put themselves in various trances and to access different like worlds and dimensions. I guess it's not really, they're not really dimensions, but I think you understand what I mean. Where like they start seeing like different stuff. Um, these fire essentially they're kind of like humans that have turned into ghosts, but then they've decided not to repent, and instead have continued to do evil things. Or, for example, if they become a spirit um, that has eaten too much, they'll continue to eat more and be greedy, be just eat, yeah, that kind of thing. It's got a cool villain, but I feel like the way that was handled was a bit underwhelming. I was really, really excited for this kind of Monster Hunter style story because it sounded really cool, but the magic system wasn't utilized in a good way to make that satisfying, in my opinion. It also had a romance subplot that I wasn't a massive fan of, although I think it did get pretty good towards the end in that regard. So yeah, there's a lot of things that I really enjoyed about this book, namely the setting, the Thai inspiration. I thought it had a really cool magic system. It had some cool world building, but I think that the magic system wasn't used well enough towards the monster hunting purposes, and that became a bit of a kind of like a side thing. It wasn't as important to the overall story because it was more about corruption and monarchy and things like that. So I'm going to put it in above average, not top tier. I'll put it below Fever House, above Lord of the Flies. I did really, really enjoy it. I think it was an absolutely phenomenal debut book, and I'm excited to see what Celine Goldenberg has next. Next up, I have Poirot's Early Cases by Agatha Christie. I think this book was pretty decent. I definitely enjoyed Poirot's like investigating style. It was easy to follow. It was fun. It was page turnery. I think this year I read maybe too many short story collections to be able to fully appreciate it. But I think it did a pretty good job. I'm gonna put it above average. Whereabouts though? I shall put it below Alice and above Celestial Magic. It definitely did make me interested in reading some more Agatha Christie, reading some more Poirot. I would definitely enjoy reading a full length one of these stories as opposed to a um, short story collection. But at the same time, I feel like crime is not my genre based on my impressions of Thursday Murder Club. So who knows when I shall pick one of those up. I guess it's going to have to be when I'm in the mood for it. Next up, I have Ripe by Sarah Rose Etter. This was a really, really good book. I picked it up from the library, and it's basically about this woman who lands her dream job in some kind of corporate thing in Silicon Valley. And she's someone who her dad has molded her into kind of accepting that she wants this job or wants to work in this kind of thing. And she finds out that it wasn't quite as glamorous as she thought it'd be. She's overworked. Her boss is not a very nice person. Her mother was not a very nice person. And she's got this little like black hole traveling around with her that changes as her emotions change. Um, it's a good exploration of how toxic capitalism can be to the average person, because you're constantly forced to be productive and meet these deadlines and create these products and that kind of thing. It was quite a short read and it was quite good. I think it kind of goes on to lessons that we all know at this point of capitalism. So it's not super novel, but it is fresh to see this from a woman's perspective and kind of empathize with the experiences that she goes through. So I'm going to put it in above average, whereabouts maybe um, below orange mocha chip frappuccino years. Next up, I have The Satanic Verses by Salman Rushdie. This is a very visceral story following two people that fall out of a plane as the plane has some kind of accident and they land up on the shores of an English beach. What follows is their kind of the way that they are treated and how they kind of start their lives afresh in England. One is an actor, um, the other is, I forget. It's a very, very visceral story. It's very complex and it has a lot of stuff rooted in kind of the story of Muhammad from the Quran. And I am not very knowledgeable about this, so I think a lot of stuff in this book did go over my head. I think it's a book that you can really, really appreciate if you are very knowledgeable about that kind of thing. But I am not. It is quite slow, and a lot of it is quite hard to understand because it is once again quite visceral. There's some elements of like magical realism with the main character kind of transforming into this devil-like creature, and he's shunned. But at the same time, it does have a lot of relatable things in the story, such as a person trying to integrate with a new culture and a different society, and kind of the way that foreigners are treated in a new land. So there is a little bit of things for everyone in this book, which is a good thing. Um, but it's definitely a book that it's so deep and complex and intricate that you can spend months of your life reading this book and studying it. So it's kind of in the opposite direction of the Beasting, where the Beasting is semi-readable with some artistic kind of choices that I didn't like, but is quite shallow. I think Satanic Verses is very, very difficult to get into and a very complex story. And but at the same time, it's in terms of its stylistic choices, is a lot more easy to pick up. I'm going to put it above average. I'm going to put it um, above Beasting because it is above Beasting. I quite enjoyed the book, but I think if I if I ever get in the mood to reread it, I'll need to do some research and go really, really heavy into the themes. Next up, I have Seal Rat by Mira Mason, the same author that wrote Gaping Wound. I think this was a much better story. It doesn't rely so much on body horror and grossing out. And it's kind of like it's a story about a kid that gets bullied, and he's bullied so bad that he doesn't want to walk home and kind of be on the same path as his tormentors. So he starts taking like a journey home through these sewers, and he meets these rats that end up becoming friends with him and being like the devil on his shoulder, getting him to escalate the situation and do some very messed up things. I I think it is kind of mid, but it's also actually quite good. So I'm actually going to put it as fairly low in above average. I'll put it below Celestial Magic. It's quite a short story. You can read it over the course of maybe like a couple hours. And if you're in the mood for that kind of thing, it's definitely worth a shot. So yeah, there's that. Next up, I have The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes by Arthur Conan Doyle. Like the Poirot book, it is a collection of short stories written for about Sherlock Holmes. I'm not gonna lie, I actually didn't like this book that much. Maybe it caught me at a bad time, where I just maybe wasn't in the mood for it. But I was kind of just a bit bored about the stories. And I actually just preferred Agatha Christie's version of these crime stories with Poirot. So if Poirot is, where is he? Poirot is in above average. I could put this in mid, but at the same time, I just didn't like it. So if I'm being honest, it's in that tier. Next up, I have The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. This is the original classic that details the accounts of the Headless Horseman and his legend. It was a fairly short story that had some very nice descriptions of the various landscapes and environments and the forests and stuff like that. It had some okay action sequences. I don't think because it's such a short story, unless you're like really, really into the story of the Headless Horseman, it's just not that great. I wasn't a massive fan of it. I liked it, but it's not really left a lasting impression on me, and I think I'd rather read a more in-depth story about the Headless Horseman as a more central protagonist rather than like a lurking legend kind of thing. But yeah, it is kind of funny that there were some pretty ridiculous scenes that did have me laughing a little bit. I'm going to put it in mid. I'm going to put it below Great Gatsby because I think I enjoyed Great Gatsby just a little bit more. Next up, I have Snow Crash by Neil Stevenson, and it does pain me to say this, but I did not like this book. Its premise is super, super cool. It's kind of like this techno samurai guy that's also a pizza delivery driver in the metaverse. And what he did by predicting the metaverse is very, very impressive considering the time this book was published. But it just went on and on and on about these kinds of like pseudo religious mythical events about the Tower of Babylon and languages that I just really didn't care for. If it really cut out a lot of that stuff, I'd say this book could be above average. But just because it was such a slog that I got really, really bored, I can't rate it that high. The characters were okay. There were some all right action sequences. Some of the environments were quite cool with that like floating ship thing that was going on. I guess all ships float, but this kind of like semi-industrial weird cult thing. It's such a fragmented story. Like it has a lot of very novel ideas within it. It's just one thing that really overwhelmed it for me that spoiled a lot of the enjoyment I otherwise could have had. All right, up next we have The Will of the Many and The Strength of the Few by James Islington. I'll mainly talk about the first book because I don't want to spoil what happens in the second, apart from a few minor comments I shall make. The Will of the Many is about this guy, Viz, who basically he was the prince of a country, and then the hierarchy invaded and executed his family, and so he's essentially going undercover, trying to survive without his identity being revealed. And he has a line he can't cross, which is that he doesn't want to cede his will, um, which is essentially giving his power to other people so they can use it in like this pyramid where the people at the top of the pyramid are like really strong and they have like 90% of the power, and then the further down you go, the less power you have and the more of your power you're giving upwards. So it's basically a pyramid scheme, the fantasy book. And he's given a unique opportunity where he wants to investigate this kind of unsolved death of this guy's brother. Um, and to do so, he goes to this academy. So you've got a bit of like school mystery, action, one-upmanship thing going on. And he starts at the bottom class and needs to prove himself and climb up to essentially being at the top class, the top students, to be given a chance to, leave the academy, and attain a specific role that would allow him to not have to cede his will to anyone further, um, keeping him from crossing that line that he doesn't want to cross. It's quite a serious book. It's quite like Roman inspired, I'd like to say, in terms of its kind of the environmental details and things like that. There's a bit of sci-fi thrown in there with the way that maybe like trains and stuff are powered by will. Essentially, this whole society is powered by will. Every aspect of it is, and it's really really cool. It's a great story. It's very coherent. I think the characters are pretty decent. Viz is absolutely incredible. I'm going to put The Will of the Many in top tier. I'm going to put it above Making Money but below Harry Potter. And then The Strength of the Few, based on how the first book ended, no spoilers by the way, I thought that the world would really open up, and that it did. The way that it opened up, I was not expecting, but it took the story in a completely different direction that I was not expecting, and I like being surprised. So, do I think The Strength of the Few is better or worse than Will of the Many? I think I slightly preferred the Will of the Many just because it was a lot more focused. The Strength of the Few jump around a lot more in terms of perspectives and things like that, but they are so closely matched in terms of my enjoyment and what they do. I think what Strength of the Few does is maybe more impressive, but I just like the focus that the Will of the Many had by just being very coherent and very linear, and it kind of has a bit of like a Red Rising thing where there's kind of like a rebel faction that are influencing things in the background. So there's multiple factions. Viz has to learn who he can trust and who he can't, and really try to play the system in a very, very entertaining, very kind of blood rushing, like adrenaline filled kind of way. It's a absolutely fantastic, top tier fantasy series, and I can't wait for the next book, which will come out in a year, 2 years, something like that. Up, I have Sula by Toni Morrison. I picked this one up from the library, so thank you, library, big W. This book is about two people that were kind of like instantly became friends, but over the course of their lives, an event happened that kind of split them apart and made them go their own separate ways. It's a very powerful story that delves into topics of racism, segregation, how difficult life can be, especially during financial troubles when there's kind of like a financial collapse and things like that. Um, and there's some really, really shocking scenes in this book that have you be like, WTF? Considers things like drug addiction. It's a very, very powerful book in terms of character exploration. I'm going to put it in top tier. I'm going to put it, I think, below Honeycomb. It's just one of those books that, because it's so character focused, not that much happens in terms of plot, so it's kind of difficult to remember a lot of what goes on unless you've like read the book a lot of times. But it is quite a short read, so, and I'd say, based on the cultural significance and the literary significance, it's a book that, if you really want to get into reading as a hobby, especially in terms of like contemporary literary fiction, it's definitely worth a read. Next up, I have The Body by Stephen King. I got this one from the library as well. So, this is a book about some kids who hear that, this kid has gone missing and he was never found. And then all of a sudden, one of the characters' brother stumbles upon the body. And so, as a kind of, let's go on a trip, all of us. Let's find this body. It will be an adventure. They go out and set off on this trip, and they have some very paranoid situations, some very dangerous, threatening situations, and it's not a scary book, but there is some very adrenaline fueled moments, and it's one of those books where it's kind of like a coming of age story, and it's got a very clear message that sometimes, despite your friends being your friends, they may not be the best people to hang around with in terms of, your future, your career, your whatever you plan to do, and things like that. So it's an alright book. I don't think it's incredible. I think people that love it like really love it, but for me, I think it was okay. It really didn't have a lot of the elements of Stephen King's writing that I really enjoy. So I'm going to put it towards the bottom of above average because it is still a decent book. Up next, we have The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. So this place holds a little place in my heart because it is one of the first books that I reviewed on this channel. It's about this princess who, following the death of the empress, is kind of told, "Hey, look, she's endorsed by the church, by the Pope, and is told to travel off to this country to become the new ruler. And along with her, she's got a cast of misfits called the Devils, and they're all very, very different to one another. So you've got a werewolf, you've got like an elf that can turn invisible, you've got a Templar that can never die. You've got, just say the werewolf yet, got the werewolf. You've got like the serious one. You've got a sorcerer. And they're also different to one another, both in terms of their powers and their personalities. So it's really, really fun to see them interact between one another and kind of grow as a team, especially when they're faced with these really dangerous, threatening situations with all of these different people that are trying to become the rulers, to become kind of defeat their friends and family, to become the emperor. It's a really, really good book. It doesn't take itself too seriously. I'd say it's like the best comparison I have is it's like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Stardust Crusaders, because it's this group of characters going on a big journey, facing dangers around every corner. It's got some fantastic action sequences that are really easy to follow, and some really, really funny moments. So yeah, really fantastic book. I am going to put it at the bottom of top tier, maybe above above Mockingjay, I'd say. That seems like a good place for me. Maybe even yeah, I should put it there. Above Bury Your Gaze and above Gwendy's Final Task. Yeah, great book. Highly recommend. But up next, I have The Hole by Hiroko Oyamada. So this is a story basically about this couple. They move to a rural area in Japan because the wife, her husband finds a new job, and so they move house close to his mother and father. And so as a housewife, she does not have that much to do, especially in such a boring place where there's not that much to do. So she goes to the supermarket, she goes on walks, she meets all the local people, and there's some quite weird things that happen. The main thing is, I thought this book would be a lot weirder and a lot more like spiraling kind of thing. But it just, I think it didn't quite satisfy that itch I had. So I'm gonna put this book in mid. It's quite short. It didn't hurt me to read it. I'm gonna put it below cat. I'm gonna put it below Sleepy Hollow. It's quite. It's a book that hasn't left much of an impression. Although I think some people do really like this one. So yeah. Up next, I have Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. So this is a book which follows, I think, Jim Hawkins, and he and his mother run an inn or a pub. And one day, he overhears this pirate that comes and tells stories, and is a bit of an infamous character that frequents his place of work and living. Um, Talking about this treasure map that leads to Treasure Island, and and then one day he dies, and so in his room, his lodging, this map is available, and so Jim Hawkins takes it, and he gathers up a crew, and they go out to try and find the treasure. This is a story about treachery. It's a story about adventure. It's a little bit of fun, and it's a book that um, while quite short, it is quite dense. There's a lot going on. There's not that many characters, but they all have their own kind of motives and intentions. It's written as a kid's story, so it's quite easily digestible. But it is a book that is a good read for both children and adults. Although maybe for today's children, it is a bit harder to pick up because of the ye olde language. I quite enjoyed it. I'd say I'd put it above average. Maybe above the body because it was a yeehaw pirate adventure. Next up, I have The Trunk by Kim Ryu Ryung. This is a book that is about a woman who is part of a company that essentially does like contract marriages. So if people have like a divorce and they want to keep up appearances that they're living, a good life with a nice wife, that kind of thing, they might hire or contract a marriage for a year or two. Or if someone wants to cover up that they are gay, they might hire a wife to play that role and to keep up appearances in public. So it kind of follows that concept. In all of its good, bad, and ugly, and it is quite interesting. The main criticism I had for this book was that there's a really, really interesting sub story with this like stalker guy, and after a few incidents, a few things, it's kind of sidelined. Like there's like corruption going on, and there's like a weird culty thing going on, and that specific element of the story, which was one of the more interesting things that happens, just gets completely swept to the side and not like capitulated upon. Is that the right word? So I think it's quite interesting, but it didn't like live up to everything that it could have. The book was quite funny. There was like this old lady constantly making jibes with like a coffee machine at the main character, and I thought that was quite funny. We had an interesting dynamic between the main character and one of her friends because like there's kind of some like unrequited kind of love going on there. This book tackles a lot of themes, but I don't, considering its length, it doesn't have time to let all of those various elements breathe. And so it's kind of a bit of a a jack of all trades, master of none situation where it tries to do too much and it ends up stumbling a little bit because of it. So I am going to put this book, unfortunately, in the mid section. Maybe above Brothers Hawthorne. So we are getting towards the end here, and up next I have Utopia Avenue by David Mitchell. This is one of the best books I read this year, and it's going in the new favorites tier. I think I enjoyed. Yeah, I think I enjoyed it more than Demon Copperhead, so I think it'll be at the top. It's essentially a story that follows a group of musicians in their formation, their kind of the way they record their albums, and they get more popular and they start doing live shows. You can really feel their chemistry, and it's very electrifying the way they jam on like together on stage, and like the person forgets something, someone will fill it in, and they have these kind of like almost like improv shows, um, and it's got this like mental health subplot with one of the characters that's one of the most unique and compelling, captivating character arcs that I have ever read in any book. It's just so damn good. David Mitchell really proves that he is a master of writing with this one. It's so easy to follow, so digestible. Um, all of the characters go through their own things. You get to really feel for all the characters. They're quite different to one another, but that works because they have such good synergies to one another. Like the way that one character interacts with another will be different to the way that one character interacts with then that another person. They will have like different interrelationships, and it feels very realistic. Like one person will have different kind of inside jokes and things like that with their friends. It just feels so realistic to the way that people act, and it's funny at times, it's emotional at others. Just so much happens in this book over the span of not that many pages. It's such a good read. The best book I have read this year, in my opinion, out of the 5-star books. So yeah, there we are. Utopia Avenue by David Mitchell, new favorite. I recommend it. So the final book on my tier list that I've read this year is Widespread Panic by James Elroy. This is a very unique book. It's one of those books where I read the first chapter and was just absolutely flabbergasted. My jaw dropped to the floor because the prose in which James Elroy writes is so impressive. He just writes with alliteration upon alliteration upon alliteration. Um, it got to the point where I was like, "This is this actually going to get annoying?" Like there is way too much alliteration in this book, but luckily, just as it was getting annoying, he really toned it down. The writing style is very like choppy. It's just sentence, 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 sentence. Um, yeah, I was really impressed by the prose of this book. In terms of what the story is about, it follows this guy called Freddie, and he is essentially kind of like an informant or like shakedown artist for this magazine called Confidential, and he does a lot of very messed up things in this book, just like bugging hotels, getting confessions out of people. He is a shakedown artist. He's a pimp. He does a lot of really bad things. And yeah, this book is him essentially confessing a lot of the things that he did. This book contains a lot of trigger warnings because he is constantly getting dirt on like he like integrates with like there's like rapists, pedophiles, a step down from that, people that aren't like publicly gay or lesbian. He is tormenting a lot of people that are both bad people and people that just, you know, have something that isn't public. And yeah, it's all set. It's kind of got like a LA noir kind of writing style to it. It's a very interesting book. I just found that at times I was really invested. At other times I just didn't really care. But as I said, because I've literally never read anything like it, it was worth picking up just in terms of experiencing the prose that James Elroy has written with. So I'm going to put it in above average, maybe below the body. I think that's a good place. Actually, below Poirot, I think. So above Celestial Magic and Silver Rat. So yeah, there's my tier list of the books that I've read this year. It's been one hell of a reading year. You see here that is a lot of books. That's not even all the books because Harry Potter is narrowed down into one thing. So yeah, thank you for watching this video. I certainly hope that you've enjoyed it. It has taken me one hell of a while to get all of the recordings done, just because that is a lot of books to talk about. Apologies for the camera. The light's like really in my eyes at the moment. It's just that time of day. Yeah, please do let me know what are the best and worst books that you've read this year. I'd be really, really interested to hear. Be sure to press the like button to show your support. Give me a thumbs up for putting in the hard work. And press the subscribe button if you'd like to get more BookTube content. I do my best to upload every once in a while and get some book content into your feed. And yeah, anyway, without further ado, hope you have a banging rest of your day. Ru out.